Welcome to the Renton Rathbun Show. I am your host, Renton Rathbun. And on today's show, we have something pretty, I think it's pretty controversial once you get into the show and realize what we're talking about. But what we're doing today is we're going to be looking at how Christian institutions run and how leadership works in those things, and how you, as a parent, can assess these things, whether you're looking at a Christian school to send your kid to, or maybe even a Christian college, whatever it is, you need to know what to ask, what to look for, and all those sort of things. And I know some of you are homeschool parents, and so you're thinking, well, I'm not sending my kid to a Christian school, and that's fine. But they might want to go to a Christian college. And not every college that throws Christian on it is going to actually be helpful to you. Let's put it that way. And we'll get more into that in a minute. So this show is for parents, whether you have your kids still at home or they have left home, or if they came back. And for those of you that are grandparents or mentors, this show is for you, because what we want to do is stop bypassing parents. I think there's too many programs that take the kids away for a few weeks, send them back, and now they have all this information. What we want to do is arm our parents. And what we're doing is giving you worldviews, trying to help you understand worldviews that have been raised up against the knowledge of God so that you can respond to them biblically. Now today, to talk about this subject, about how Christian institutions work and what we should be looking for as parents, is Jenny Copeland. Now, is it Dr. Jenny Copeland?
Yes.
How about that?
Jenny's great.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Jenny Copeland. I am excited about this because you have had a lot of experience as a teacher, as an administrator. You even have your own podcast. And the podcast is called?
The Teacher Edition Podcast.
The Teacher Edition Podcast. And it's for teachers.
It is, yes.
And so you have a lot of experience not only being a teacher, not only administering over teachers, but even giving them a lot of advice and help. So with all of that, can you give us a little introduction to yourself? How did you get into teaching? Where are you today?
Sure. So I would say my love of education started when I was little. I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. My sister, she's a first grade teacher. We grew up going to school all day and we played school all evening. And my parents, they just latched onto that. So we had whiteboards, we had chalkboards, we had red pens and easy graders, you name it, we had it all. And contrary to what my sister says, I did not give all the quizzes. I did not do all the discipline. I did not only get to use the red pen. That's her side of the story. No, we both just loved education, and we were always about education. So it was very natural, and graduated, went off to college, studied education, started in LEd. The Lord gave me the opportunity to be a teacher. Loved that. That was kind of my plan, to always just be a teacher.
What grade?
So I taught upper elementary, 5th, and then 6th grade. I've taught them combined. Nice. So I've kind of landed in there. And actually during that time, my principal came to me and said, hey, would you consider stepping into the role of supervisor over the elementary school? I said, I really feel like I need some more education, some more training for that. So the Lord led me back to school. I got my master's, my specialist, and then actually the Lord brought me into the university setting as an assistant to a dean. And during that time, I just kept taking classes, loved it. Of course, you don't take classes. Mm-hmm. And actually, when the deans came to me and said, you are just about to finish your doctorate. Like, you have enough courses. Why don't you just finish it? And I thought, that's not really where I was headed. I don't really need a doctorate. Not sure if I really like that stigma. I mean, how would I use it? I just want to be an elementary teacher. Just an elementary teacher, right?
Just, of course.
Well, as the Lord had it, made it very clear, finished out my doctorate, and then the Lord allowed me to become an assistant principal and then a principal. So I was about 10 years in administration. Absolutely loved that opportunity. Just great. And I just love how you can see how the Lord uses every step along the way. And so now I'm teaching a class at the graduate education level for university. I teach educational technology, but my main role is at BJU Press, and I work in the educational technology department. So I'm a senior manager there, and I just love it because I still get to be a part of education. So every day I'm working on tools for educators. I'm out in schools training, just absolutely love it. And one of those responsibilities is the host of the Teacher Edition podcast. So just an opportunity to pour into educators and support them as we can.
Okay. Wow. Very cool. I think I didn't know all that. Okay. As we think about Christian education, I think a lot of people, a lot of parents, kind of have a rosy view of Christian education. I think they kind of think, everyone's a Christian, everyone's kind of on the same page, and everyone loves Jesus, and so everyone probably gets along just fine. As we start thinking about Christian education and all the places that people send their kids, what would you say was supposed to be, as Christian education started, what was supposed to be the purpose of Christian education?
Okay, so I don't know how far back you want to go, but I think ultimately God gave that responsibility to parents to train their children and, of course, train them in the scriptures, train them to know God, to grow in their walk with Him. So I don't know if you want to call that Christian education, but we could go back that far. I think as far as going back to organizations or institutions, I mean, back into the earliest centuries, there were religious education organizations where people could go and learn philosophy and theology. And then over the years, we look at the Middle Ages and the Reformation when they start bringing in those literacy classes. And now it's like we're teaching them to read so they can read the Bible as well. And then it's morphed into what we know as the modern Christian school movement, where, students are going into organizations, into institutions, getting that academic training, that Bible training. But the whole key of that is to train them to be Christ-like, to give them that biblical worldview. So everything that as they move on to those next phases in their life, they have that as their foundation. So I think it goes back to the responsibilities ultimately with the parents, and whether they choose to homeschool and keep that there at home or send them to an organization, it's all about that base to learn the scriptures and grow in their knowledge of Christ.
I like that. Okay. So when we think about Christian education, we're thinking about Scripture, how Scripture is this authority over every other kind of knowledge, and then how does that knowledge grow out of Scripture? And we've come to call that a biblical worldview. So we had several episodes ago, and of course you guys can go back and look at this, we had Brian Smith on here, and we talked about what worldview was and all that sort of thing. So our listeners should know and kind of grasp that idea of authority of Scripture. Now, we have become a little commercialized, even in the Christian realm.
Yes.
How has Christian education kind of changed a little bit as we are now in the 21st century, in 2025? How have things changed from when it first started out? I'll give you some context. So it first started out, you had a lot of people that in these churches that said, we don't want public schooling, we want Christian schooling. And some people homeschooled, but some people said, I want an institution. And so they said, we will make what will be called a Christian school, and it will have the Bible at the center, and from Scripture, we will talk about everything else, and that's how it kind of started out.
Right.
How has it kind of changed to now?
Well, I think they're facing a lot more pressures. So now it's, all these programs we can add on, all these distractions, if you want to put it, from what was the original intention. We're studying the Bible, and then, of course, the academics. Now we have all these pressures, whether from society or families, to get bigger and better, add more programs, focus on this, take more families that maybe aren't necessarily a big fit, maybe even for some making money. Like, I feel like there's a lot of distractions that have come in, and I think there's that daily fight to find that balance and adapting to our modern challenges, appropriately and biblically, but staying committed to what that school's mission is. I think positively speaking, though, wow, coming into this century, we're seeing just so many more resources and opportunities that can be used correctly. I think in many schools, there's more of a focus on mentorship or discipleship. There's even, in some cases, some funds available that weren't in the past. So I think there are some positive things, but I think we're being pulled a number of different directions that we didn't necessarily have starting out.
Okay. So I'll give you a little story from my life. I went back and I spoke at my alma mater, my high school. Nice. So, and a lot of the people that were there used to be my teachers. Now they're in administration.
Wow.
And now it's a big school. It went from just being, just Christian school to being a charter school that was Christian. So there were some things that that they, you know, when you're getting funding that has strings attached, there's
Right.
all kinds of issues.
Right.
And, you know, they kind of work their way through that. But one thing I found was during my talk, there were a few teachers there. Well, I didn't know who they were. I mean, there's just a big crowd of people,
Sure.
and they all work at this school. And as I'm talking, it's clear to me that 2 or 3 are starting to talk to each other and get upset at what I'm saying. Now, what I'm saying to the woke world is very terrible because I'm talking about old-fashioned Christianity from the Reformation to today, and I know that, you know, any kind of idea that there's only 2 genders, homosexuality is a sin, all these different things really offend people.
Oh yeah, being biblical gets you every time.
It does, but it's old, boring Christianity. It's always been there, but now it's awful, right? So I noticed these 3 people are starting to talk, then they start to get loud, then they start shouting back at me. And, which of course, you know, I'm kind of angsty already. So I kind of enjoy someone wants to fight. That's kind of cool. So we start fighting.
This is good to know.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
so be
thanks.
ready. This is going to be a rough interview. So they start shouting back because they didn't like what I was saying. And then of course I talk back. I was polite, you know, it felt polite anyway. So anyway, at the end, the principal comes to me and the administrator comes to me and say, "Oh, we're so sorry. We're so sorry." We, you know, if of course the administrator leaves the room when I start talking and didn't know anything was happening. Anyway, so they come back. "We're so sorry. If we were in the room, we would have taken care of it," and all that. But what they said was, we have to keep up with the public schools, and the public schools offer all these programs. And if we're going to be keeping up with the public school that have all these programs, we got to keep up with them. And one of the programs that we want to offer here that's brought in a lot of people is these speech pathology opportunities for kids that have issues. And so that's where these teachers, they were just speech pathology people that come in to do speech pathology and then they leave and things like that. And they said, you know, they're kind of Christians, but they're a little different than us. I'm like, you mean different as in like not Christian?
Right.
So anyway, what they were getting at was, well, speech pathology is just a skill that's not really covered by God's word, so we can kind of
neutral.
Yeah. So we don't need those teachers to be on the same level as our regular teachers. And I know probably in a perfect world you would ask them, is that what you want to do? And they would say no. But in a world of competition, they get desperate, right?
Yep.
There's no one to teach Spanish, so we'll grab someone of a denomination that's far away from where we are, that really doesn't agree with even how someone comes to get saved, but we'll take them because we need a Spanish teacher. And if we don't have a Spanish teacher, they're going to go to blah, blah, blah school, and we won't have them. And so I have seen a lot of pressure on Christian schools because, like what you said, that competition, the programs that they feel they need to have. Yeah. How has Christian education changed since COVID?
Yeah, it's funny how we refer to, it's almost like BC AD now, you know, it's before COVID, after COVID. I would say logistically, there is a huge influx of students wanting to be in Christian schools. Fit or no fit, families are looking for alternatives. I would say also families are more, they're more transient, maybe more shifting, kind of in and out, what they like, don't like, things like that. I think society as a whole is more out of the box. They seem just a little more, I guess, the norms are challenged. You know, there isn't just a stability anymore. And I would see that in families, you know, and parents, they'd come in and challenge things. I was a principal through COVID and after COVID, and it was just the stress, and everybody seemed a little more angst. For some, maybe they were more involved. I think maybe, you know, as parents saw some things were going on in public schools that pulled them more into the involvement in education as a whole. I wouldn't say necessarily saw that in the Christian school of parents being more involved. If anything, they were more stressed and less connected. But I think for many schools, and I see this as I travel around, for many schools, it brought to them a new resolution to get on mission. I was actually just talking with an administrator the other day. I said, how are things going at the school? And she said, we're struggling. We've lost about 100 families. I said, oh my, what's happening? And she said, we are paying the cost of COVID. She said, coming out of COVID, we opened when other schools weren't. And we were so excited because we had dealt with so many financial issues. And maybe for once, we were actually going to not have financial issues because we had people knocking down our door to get in. And she said, and we wavered on our mission, let them in, and now they have just wreaked havoc. She said, those are now my middle school, high school students, and we're struggling, and our strong families are leaving because of the influence of these. We're having to, expel students. We have a lot of turmoil going on right now. So I think it really did affect. COVID had a lot of impact on Christian schools.
So if you're a parent listening to this, or a grandparent, and you're maybe you homeschool, but you're looking to put them into a Christian school, or you're going to think about a Christian education in college or whatever it is. There are different kinds of Christian schools. There's a Christian school that what they call is more mission-minded, so they accept unsaved kids as long as they hold to some kind of standard of the school.
Right.
There's other schools called covenant schools. I think I'm getting these terms right.
You're right.
In which you do need to have a profession of faith to go to that school. Whether it be one of the family members, one of the parents saying, I'm a Christian, or the kid himself, it varies. But be aware of that. I think that a lot of people don't understand when they go to Christian school, they think, oh, these are all going to be Christians here.
Right.
And you need to know if the school is a mission-minded school where they want to try and win kids as they come in, or if they're a covenant school and say, no, we're looking for families that are Christian families that have kids.
Yeah.
Now, what's important about that is after COVID, there were some covenant schools that went to a quasi-mission. I wouldn't say they went totally to mission, but they went to quasi-mission. So it was like the standard of which, family member was a Christian, kind of, the bar went low.
It's true.
It went from you have to be committed to Jesus Christ to maybe just being fond of him. I don't know.
Even tolerant.
Tolerant.
If you're okay, this is what we're going to teach. If you're okay with that, we'll take you.
Yeah, I've been to many schools where they say, some of our parents are lesbian parents or gay, two gay dads, and but they send them here, and we tell them we're going to teach them about Jesus and that homosexuality is wrong. We don't care because we don't want our kid to get knifed in the hall or whatever, and I understand, but would you agree that if you're going to be a school that says we are going to be a mission school and we're gonna allow unsaved kids in, or families that have no affiliation with Christianity, and doesn't it take a completely different strategy?
100%.
Yeah. So what? I know I gave you questions ahead of time, and this isn't on there, but just from your view, what kind of strategies do you think are helpful that a parent can look for? So if a parent is saying, okay, I don't mind sending my kid to a school that has unsaved kids there, what strategy should the school have that the parent should be looking for to ensure that their kid is in a good spot, if I can put it that way?
I think I would look at their guidelines, their policies. How do they approach? Okay, so you have students in your school that maybe don't have that God foundation, if you want to put it there. Like when you say do right, what is do right to them? You cannot go back to biblical principles and dealing with it. They don't have that foundation. So how are they going to deal with those students? Like, do they get away with more? Are they held to the same standard? What is allowed as they're learning? Because, they're coming into something. So do they get a pass? Yeah. And how, I guess, are parents going to be supported if their student comes home and reports something that happened? Is like, well, they're new here, they don't quite get it, they get a pass. And I've heard that repeatedly of just that divide. Well, you're a saved kid, you're a church family, you can't do that, but they aren't. And that can really cause confusion and frustration in students, as they're watching that happen, and in families. I think just looking I would just really encourage them to talk through, and this could be a homeschool family too. Co-ops do this as well. Who do they allow in the co-op? And just really talk with them about their policies, how things are handled, and making sure that school is really there, is giving the gospel. I mean, sometimes it's just like, well, are you really trying to reach those families?
Yeah.
Because that is the point of that type of school, is to be a testimony to those families and see them saved.
Yeah.
And if that's not what they're really working for, that'd be concerning as well, because you're not going to see those lives changed.
That's correct. Yeah, I just spoke at a school a week or two ago, had over 1,000 students. It was huge. And what they told me, they were having a spiritual emphasis week because they said that these kids, their intention was, and this always starts with good intentions, their intention was to start allowing unsaved families to be a part of this as long as they toe the line with everything else. And what they found was, they would have moments where the kids, they'd have these like revival moments, and a lot of the kids that were unsaved would be like, no, I get it, and have these salvation experiences. I don't know if it was real or not. They don't know if it's real or not, but it seemed real at the time, and they seemed kind of. But now they said after a semester's gone by, everything seems like they've lost all that.
Yeah, the fruit's not there.
The fruit's not there, and so they, I came and I spoke for a couple days, and I noticed that like the junior hires were really with me. You know what I mean? Some old guy who has giant teeth is talking to you, and they're like, but at least they're kind of rooting for me. They want me to succeed. You can tell. They were really cute kids. Then the high school came. Lot of high school kids. There had to have been 500-600 of those kids all in there, and they did not seem well. There were some, and they would sit towards the front. The kids that kind of pay attention. So I'd walk into the aisle as far back as I could, because I'm a teacher at heart, and so I want to make sure the back row is annoyed.
Yes, management by walking around.
Yes, and then looking them in the eye while they're talking, and this is what happened. I'm back row, of course, and they're like me, and they're talking and everything, and I'm talking about Jesus, looking at them, looking in the eye, and then they would glance at me, see that I am standing literally 2 feet away, and they're still talking to each other.
Wow.
And I just think, how does that affect the other students? And so that leads me to this other question. Because I saw a lot of faculty that were frustrated. They're frustrated because a lot of faculty today leave the public school and they come to a Christian school and they think this is going to be different. And I know exactly how that is, because I went from teaching at public colleges and universities for 15 years, came to a Christian university and thought, I'm in heaven. I remember praying at the beginning of class thinking, this is the greatest thing. And within like 3 or 4 weeks, I was super discouraged because the kids did not care about God. I didn't care if they cared about me or thought I was interesting, because I know for a fact I'm not interesting. But the fact that what we were talking about, Christ, didn't matter. And I was so disillusioned. And I saw that same look on those teachers. Wow. How does, the teachers are dealing with the decisions of the administration.
Correct.
The administration saw an opportunity to get more kids in, which isn't always a bad thing. I mean, I know it sounds like, capitalism, greedy, but it's also, how do we affect more
Correct.
kids with they had amazing facilities. And, if you can get more kids in there because you have the facilities to do it, why not do it?
Sure.
But now the teachers seem to be suffering under that. How does the administration's decisions and relationship to the faculty and the faculty's relationship to the administration affect students?
Yeah, I think there's a direct correlation there. I don't know about you, but I've been in schools where you walk in and you feel like something doesn't feel right here. You just feel like they're not on. Something's just not right. And I think when there is that healthy relationship, there's that support, there's that trust, there's that camaraderie, that collaboration, that transparency. I think trust is huge. You have to be able to trust, that your administration has your back, that you can share things, that you're working together. And when it's not there, the teachers get discouraged. They don't feel supported. There's a fear factor. Like, they don't really know what's going on. They don't trust maybe even each other. They don't trust their faculty. Words are cheap. They can say you love you. Hey, I love you guys. You love you guys, and I'm going to do everything for you. I support you. I got your back. But when the administration isn't showing that, the teacher and they kind of are hesitant. Then, like you said, do I address that behavior? Do I take this on because I don't feel like the administration has my back? And you can see it's just trickling right down. And then the students are left in this quandary of, hey, can I get away with that? Why? And even I've been in classrooms where the teacher will openly not support the administration. I'm sorry, I know we have this rule, I didn't make it, type of thing.
Yeah.
Well, now we're also, that's not a biblical, support of authority, and we're just feeding that right to our students. So I think from there becomes distracted teaching and teacher turnover, and that's hard on students as well, when there's not that stability. So I do think there's a direct correlation.
Yeah, because students tend to either like or dislike school based on teachers.
Absolutely.
Very rarely do they I couldn't go to that school because the administrator, they don't know who that guy is.
Right.
Or woman
Right.
is. Do you see how open I am?
That's
about?
Great. Good job.
I'm just very open-minded.
Thank you.
So as I'm thinking about this, you said sometimes the teacher doesn't feel supported. Now, there might be parents listening who haven't been in the educational world. They might be in completely different worlds, and so they don't know what supported means. So when I taught in the public colleges, universities, I was not supported, but I knew why I wasn't supported. I wasn't supported because I was talking about the Bible and God in my philosophy classes that, they did not want me to speak about those things, but that's what tenure's for. And so you do speak about those things, and the administration would call me in and said we had another complaint, another student, which, always seemed to be some white kid. Because I noticed my toughest classes, my heart would, and I know this sounds terrible, but my heart would sink when I would look around and all I would see was white kids. I thought this is going to be a tough class because they're going to turn me in. When I looked around, there was another school that I taught at, there was lots of diversity. You might have 2 or 3 white kids, but for the most part, you have black kids and Latino kids and all these other kinds of students never got in trouble. I could talk about God, I could talk about scripture and how that related to this philosopher, and they just thought, interesting. But when it was, so when I was at this other school, when I talked about, I would put it in. I wouldn't just throw it out of nowhere. I mean, I had a system. So anyway, I would get in trouble, and I'd be sitting in the chair, with the chair in the chair's office and explaining what I said, and no, I wasn't trying to be hurtful to the Hindu in the back and all that sort of thing. And I was unsupported, but I was unsupported because I knew why.
Right.
But you're talking about a Christian school. How do faculty in a Christian school feel unsupported? Wouldn't everyone be supporting each other?
Well, I think when there's inconsistency as well, so let's just say administration sets the rules, right? So we're going to set the rules. Here you go. Well, as a teacher, you feel like, okay, I'm here to support that. I'm going to carry through on that. You made it. I'm going to do it. But when you see those above you being inconsistent, not following through, playing favorites, when you sense, like I said, that lack of trust, it's like, okay, there's something going on and I don't feel a part of it. I don't feel you don't feel approachability in your administration. You don't see them. They're not around. It's just those types of things. It's like, okay, I need you right now. And of course, a lot of my experience is at the elementary level. And, there's always a teacher on her way down to the office with something that's happened, and when you're not there, or when it's like, you know what, they need to know what answer they're going to get because they know that there's consistency. And in this day and age, there are so many situations cropping up. And if you feel like, I don't know where my administrator would stand on this, that's a rough place to be. Like you said, you knew you weren't going to get the support. But in a Christian environment, we should be on the same team. We should know where we stand, know what policies there are, know what the mission of the school is, and they should be able, there's predictability in that. And when you get all the way down there and ask for support from your administrator, and it's, well, you know what, let's just let this slide, or we're going to tweak that a little bit, or don't handle it that way, or turn it, you know, let's not focus on that. Let's not, I guess it's just a culture thing.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to put it, but it's just, there's not that stability and predictability. That's really hard on a teacher.
Yeah.
You feel very siloed at that point.
Well, when you're an administrator of any Christian institution, whether it's a college or a high school or elementary school or whatever, you are creating a culture.
Correct.
Because as the leader goes, so does everyone else.
That's right.
Because no one else has the choice, right? I think that happens in churches. I think churches have certain cultures about them because of what the pastor and the elders or deacons or whatever have steered the church to kind of look like. So one thing I have found in the history of me working in colleges is that administrators in colleges, now this happens more in smaller colleges. You know, Christian colleges are usually smaller colleges. Even if you think they're big, they're quite small compared to, like, I taught at a community college once that had about 15,000 students. So the president and the administrators were all just paper pushers. No one, you know, there wasn't a lot of contact with the students.
Correct.
But the smaller your school is, you have more contact with students. What do you do when your administrator seems to want to please the students? That there's like some kind of, I don't know what it is. And this happens when administrators are put in front of the students a lot. I even saw this at the school I was at a couple weeks ago. The administrator often spoke directly to the students, and I could say he did not care what they thought.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, he was Dutch, so you know there is something about Dutch people. I've had a lot of experience with Dutch people. I had got one of my degrees at a school in Grand Rapids, and if you know anything about Grand Rapids, there's a lot of Dutch people, and so there was a very strong focus he had. But I've also seen in schools where the administrator really wants to be liked by the kids. How dangerous can that become?
Incredibly dangerous.
How?
Well, you know, I think the drive to be accepted, to be cool, to be the yes person, it can take you right off mission. You know, quickly. It's a fast slide because we're human. We like people to like us, right? We want to, and our immediate response, like, yeah, maybe I could do this. And I've been in situations where people above me have overridden things, and it's just like to be able to say yes. Yeah. And I've sat in seminars where, you know, say yes to everything. Okay, as much as possible, we do want to say yes. I mean, we talk about customer service minded. Okay. There's a debate on that. So
yeah, we'll get into that.
Oh, great. Okay. So, but I guess when you go in a store and, you know, and they say the customer is always right or whatever. Okay, those are nice little mantras to have, but finding that balance in a Christian school, if it's off mission, then they're not right. You know, that needs to be talked to. It also goes back to that support thing. So when a leader is always saying yes to the customer, there's someone who's being trampled, because if a rule was made and you're willing to give it up, well, then the person who was trying to enforce that rule just got thrown under the bus. You know, it's just, it has a lot of far-reaching frustrations in always, and you know, honestly, it's not biblical. The thing of yes, always yes, that's not biblical. Look at Christ's example. He didn't say yes to everything.
No, he didn't.
You know, there was confrontation, appropriate confrontation, and we're supposed to follow his example, and just saying yes to everything just so we can, you know, play into or be buddies. And we see that a lot, especially with new teachers, you know, they cross that line of being a buddy and being a friend, and it quickly bites them because they lose respect. When those rough times come, they've not put a lot in the bank of earning that respect because it has just been about being the buddy. So well, that's a tricky thing.
Well, I think there's a lot of people that have a romantic view of education. They probably saw a Dead Poet Society at some point in their lives. and watched, they want that moment where they say, okay, open up your books at page 5. Now rip it out. Aren't I amazing? You ripped out something from, a book you bought. And so, they want that moment where they can say, I am spitting in the face of the things you don't like, and I'm the adult, which makes me cool.
Right.
And you can stand on your desk and say, oh, Captain, my captain, and have the whole moment. And I think they really think that's the pinnacle of good education. When I've taught the kids, a cool way to rebel, as long as I get to be the leader. And I think I see that in administrators that have this romantic view of one day people will stand on their desk and call me captain. And what they end up doing is trying to, what I've seen anyway is, first they'll want the students to do that. And if they don't get that, then maybe the parents will like me. And the whole time, rules that have been put into place based on mission, like you're talking about, that we expect some kind of behavior out of our students because of the mission we have.
Right.
And wouldn't it be cool if I just, as the administrator, told everyone, this is a dumb rule? And they're like, wow, he's really cool. And you might even get that moment for a few seconds, but then eventually, when you do have to, enforce some law,
right.
They hate you again.
Yeah, it's shallow and short-lived. You get that moment, that rush as a human of, oh, they love me. Yeah. But it's not sustainable long-term.
Yeah, now how would you describe, because you were talking about earning respect, which is something that has to be done when you are in leadership. What does earning respect look like?
That takes time and hard work. Consistency.
You keep saying consistency, so let me push on that. So consistency on what you've agreed to with your mission, what you've agreed to with the rules, and that kind of thing. Is that what you mean?
Yes. Consistent support, consistent. I think when a school, consistent with a mission, and there are times when you say, okay, we need to change, not because society culture thinks something else is cool and we need to go with that. But appropriate change. We need to grow, we need to roll with certain things. But I think in general, when you're unpredictable, when there's constant change, that brings a rockiness to that foundation. Yeah. And there's consistency in being biblical. That's the thing, we pull out scripture when we need to quote it, but then other time it's like you said, we'll just turn an eye on that one. Yeah. That even is an area of consistency.
And that's even something we're going to have a future show entitled "The Rise and Fall of Biblical Worldview," because biblical worldview is still important.
Yes.
But I think some administrators have felt it just didn't pay off the way they wanted to. They kind of felt it would be a little mantra that'd bring more people in. People were interested in that, and once that marketing scheme wears out, we don't need it anymore. And it does seem like there's these kind of marketing schemes that people have in order to bring people in. But how would you, just sticking on this idea of rules, okay? As a parent, okay, let me put it this way. As a parent who has a 24-year-old and saw how things kind of panned out, and now I have a 9 and 10-year-old, I'm thinking way differently than I did back when my 24-year-old was 9 and 10 years old. When my 24-year-old was 9 and 10 years old, I would think of rules as, oh, brother, okay, and I would look at the rules for my kid and say, okay, yeah, we can live with those rules. At no point did I think, until now, how are these rules going to help my child see Christianity as a consistent road of behaviors that are expected? Because this is the thing, and this, I'm getting to the question. Here it goes.
It's great.
I have heard so much. Everyone's so afraid of being a Pharisee that they feel that real Christianity is grace, 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 right? And what we have forgotten is mercy. Grace is getting something you don't deserve, but mercy is not getting what you do deserve.
Correct.
And so people kind of think that we should be able to just forget about rules, forget about it's the same people that say, God gives us, Christianity is not about a lot of rules. It's not about a lot of rules. While Paul is constantly saying, walk this way, walk this way. And Peter, First Peter is telling you that your conduct is going to be judged by the judge of all judges, who may also be your father, but he's your judge too. So watch how you're acting. So the Bible seems to care about how you act, but it seems as though there's a group of people in the Christian realm that seems to think it's more holy not to worry about rules at all. If you love Jesus, everything will just work out. How do rules help our kids in these Christian schools?
Yeah, and I've heard that too with parents wanting us to, come on, don't enforce that. Come on, that's ridiculous. They shouldn't get that consequence. Interestingly enough, so many of the parents I dealt with who said that, they wanted to force basically their home expectations or their home culture on the school. And there are rules in a school that are for organizations. It's so we don't all die with that many hundreds of people in a small space.
Right.
There are those things that just keep the day run smoothly. But there are also things that are training them in character and Christ-likeness. So a lot of people put rules into two buckets. You have the logistical ones and the biblical ones, whatever. We can argue about that. But nonetheless, when I would hear from those, don't give them a consequence. They're just learning, just let them learn. Well, it's not biblical. And then they would follow up with, well, at home, we wouldn't do that. So basically trying to bring their parenting. And, at a Christian school, if we are going to do it biblically, we have a mandate as we're partnering with parents in Christian education, helping guide those children biblically, excellence and character building, self-discipline, accountability, all those things that are growing into Christ-likeness, preparing them for their future. And I believe balance is the key. We cannot be this heavy-handed control. We have to think about their age and their ability. I get that. They're learning. Yeah. And we want to do things in love, and we want to give them an appropriate place if they need to discuss that. It's not just to do this, we're not going to talk about it type of thing. I get it. But building Christ-like character is biblical. Yeah. And that is then challenging them. That may not just be as you are, live as you would, type thing. There are going to be expectations. Excellence is biblical. We can do such and such in our building. They may not do it at home, but there are going to be things. If we are really having a biblical Christ-like school, we're going to challenge our students with that higher standard.
Yeah, right. There's so many videos right now on YouTube and TikTok of these people with these face tats saying, I can't get a job. I just don't understand. Why are people holding this against me? This is who I am. And you're like, well, then be who you are unemployed, right? We look at that and we're disgusted by that, yet we're the same parents that get upset because Johnny, got sent home because he was wearing jeans and the rule is you can't wear jeans.
Absolutely.
And we say, oh, why can't we wear jeans? This is ridiculous. Jeans are, just fine. And we get all upset. And what I found as an adult now, with I think at least more wisdom than I had when I was in my 20s, was that every job you have is going to have some rules in it that are going to appear arbitrary to us.
Absolutely.
And this idea that we have to train our kids to obey rules that make sense to them, and if it doesn't make sense to them, then even mom and dad will go to bat for you, Johnny.
Absolutely.
And then we're shocked when Johnny grows up and can't find a job because he keeps wanting to wear a hoodie to work or a hoodie to his interviews. And you say, no, Johnny, you shouldn't wear a hoodie to your interviews. Why not? A hoodie is fine. It's cold outside, right? And besides, every hero they have wears a hoodie, right? And so, okay, nothing's wrong with hoodies. I'm not trying to go, they're not unbiblical or anything.
Well, the speed limit's another example.
Yeah.
Isn't that not a rule? my car can go much faster. Life is full of rules.
It's full of rules that seem arbitrary to us.
Right.
But isn't it maturity? And let me even take it a step further. Isn't it biblical to learn how to submit yourself to your authorities?
Absolutely.
There's a good argument to say that honor your father and mother in the Ten Commandments has a side meaning, if I could put it that way. Learn how to submit to your authorities. I think it's reinforced in Romans 13. when it's talking about government, when you have to submit to government, even really bad government. I mean, we just got done with 4 years of Biden, which was terrible. He was, or whoever was running things, who knows? But, we still had to submit to things.
Right.
And even things that we found abhorrent, there was still a submission going on. And when we teach our kids that if you're going to submit to something, it better make sense to you. We are teaching them, I think, an anti-biblical position. And if I can get, according to the world standards, sexist for a moment, if we're teaching our young ladies that, and then they decide they're going to get married, and now, of course, they'll submit to their husband when it makes sense to them. I mean, if he's an idiot, then I've got to help him, and I'm not going to submit to what he says until he realizes he's an idiot, and then I'll submit, right? And we've created this attitude. We're shocked that our kids' marriages aren't working. We're shocked that they can't find jobs. We're shocked that they're having all these issues at work. And you're like, my kid was a good worker when they were growing up. What's going on? And we have instilled in them that if rules don't make sense to you, you don't have to go by them. So let me ask you this. We just have a few more minutes left. I want to be really practical with this because we have a lot of parents listening. And so they are going to want to know, okay, I'm a homeschool mom or a homeschool dad, and I want to send my kid to blah, blah, blah Christian university or college. Or I am a mom and dad, and I want to send my kid to blah, blah, blah Christian school. So I'm going to visit the school and find out what it's all about. But how do I know? I mean, there's Christian schools out there that have the word Christian. They say biblical worldview. They have posters that seem pretty Christian. And then you get there, and as your tuition is being spent, then you find out it's terrible. What can they ask? What can they look for to know whether it's a good Christian school or not?
Yeah, that's really tricky because they can say anything. And they know those buzzwords now to get people. As far as biblical worldview, don't ask about it. Like, you've got to see it played out because anybody can say anything. Their websites broadcast it. Their posters broadcast it. I would say when you look at a website, like when you go on a school's website, I often, before I visit a school, I'll go stalk them a bit just so I can learn a little bit about the culture, where I'm headed. What pops up first often indicates where their heart is, where their treasure is. I mean, when they're showing their facilities, and I know it's hard to capture biblical worldview in a picture. I get it. Yeah. But when you're seeing just picture after picture of all their sports teams or their amazing science labs or whatever, you learn a lot about the school and what their focus is. I would find out where their graduates are. Where do their graduates go? When they're all graduating, heading off to secular, and nothing against, I mean, there are great Christians that go off to secular universities, but when you have a super low percentage that ever go into, a Christian university, what's going on there? What's happening there? Look at their textbooks. So once again, so I work for BJU Press, and obviously, I have a passion for Christian textbooks, but when they're using secular textbooks, I think it tells you something about their worldview. Yeah. So I feel like, again, there is that thought out there of, well, I can get secular textbooks and we'll slap a verse on top of it or we'll add it on top. That's totally backwards. Yes. And you talk a lot about biblical worldview, and we can talk about that. I'd say observe. Go be in that school. Go hang out and see what's going on. Because again, their website can say anything. What's really happening? I also think it's really important to talk to current families. So if you have someone who's going to be in a school, get some references. Go have coffee with some of the moms and just say, hey, we're interested. Tell us about the school. You're going to glean a lot. Those moms, they're not going to hold back. Moms have a lot to say, right? And dads too. Like, send a dad golfing with a few of the dads and, see what's going on there. And I think it's looking beyond the fact that they have Bible in chapel. That, to me, doesn't even count. I mean, if they don't have that, red flag. But just because they have Bible in chapel doesn't mean you're in the safe zone. And I think it's also important to just talk to the faculty too, as you can. Like, I liked when I used to give tours, let the parents talk to some faculty from it, and I just kind of wander away. Yeah. So it gives them just a chance to just kind of get a feel if they're what the spirit is there, what their what they love about the school, and just look for those neon lights. You like neon lights, I can tell. So like look for those things that are sticking out, those themes. So maybe a few things.
That's helpful. Because I'll tell you this, what you just said goes for colleges too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of homeschool parents, and I have a few degrees from secular universities. I have taught in secular universities as well as secular colleges. And I don't think you need to apologize by saying that we should be careful how many people are going off to secular schools. Because I'm telling you, if many of our kids we think are ready. We think they're ready for that, secular school experience because Johnny is so well behaved at home. Johnny has gotten involved with his church and his youth group, and he has such a good Christian girlfriend, and Johnny is going to be okay. And I am telling you, it is rare for me to see an 18-year-old ready for a secular college.
Yeah, they have no idea what they're about to face.
They have no idea, because I can tell you what they're in for. And they're not in for a moment of immediate fight, because that's what they think is going to happen. They think they're going to get in there.
That's what's in the movies.
Yeah. And I have yet to make fun of God Is Not Dead the movie, but we'll get there. But the point is that they think when they get in that classroom, the professor's going to be like, I don't like Christianity, and they'll be ready for the fight. But what's going to happen is the professor's going to be sympathetic to Christianity, sympathetic to them, so that they could suck them in and then show them in their world of this classroom, we're going to talk about what's real. And the kid's going to feel that, and he's going to start thinking these sophisticated thoughts that he got from this guy that now says these sophisticated thoughts that you understand that made you so proud. Yeah, the Bible's not compatible with that.
Right.
And that's what I've watched kid after kid walk away from the Lord, not because of a God Is Not Dead moment where they're fighting with the faculty member, but when the faculty member is sympathetic to them and coax them and even draws them gently away from the faith. And they're not ready. And so when you're talking about homeschooling or Christian schooling, this is the battlefield, the training grounds, if I can put it that way, to get them ready. And they should be considering a Christian college. Now, there's not a whole lot of Christian colleges out there there's not like a giant swath of them that I would say, these are all good. I would say probably you can count on one hand how many I would say are okay, which is sad. Which means you need to look closely at these schools. Even you homeschool families that say, we homeschooled the whole time, but now Johnny wants to go to a Christian university. Look closely. I can tell you of Christian universities that talk about having a biblical worldview, and they have LGBTQ clubs that your kid can go to if they're having doubts about their gender or they're having desires for the same sex. So they can talk about it, which Rosaria Butterfield would tell you is just another dating opportunity for them, and it's wickedness. And so okay, if those are the things that you would do, let's start really cursory. We're looking at their website. Okay. Do these websites have mission statements? What should they be looking for just on the website alone?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think mission statement, absolutely. But I think also looking, how do they get their teacher? Like some things you're not going to be able to totally find. But I think looking at the mission statement, looking at what types of textbooks they use, definitely what kind of programs they have, looking at their handbook. Just what are you can tell a lot about a school by their handbook. Just looking at that, looking at their programs, like what are they offering? What do they offer for mentorship and discipleship, things like that? Yeah. What do their chapels look like? So I think digging into some of that, I'm repeating a little bit about, what I said before, so I don't want to use up your time with that. But I think digging a little bit deeper into, don't just read the words.
Yeah.
Read between those lines of what's really going on. Watch their promotional videos, because once again, when they're showing off their gym and their football field, instead of showing like how are we really mentoring these students, how are we really growing them in Christ-likeness, those things should pop out at you.
Yeah. That's really helpful. When you're talking about chapel, chapel tells you a lot about what's going on theologically. And a lot of these schools put their chapel online, so you can watch the whole thing.
Interesting. Yeah, great idea.
Yeah. Now, they may not show the worship part where they're doing the music and all that stuff. They might only show the part where someone's speaking, but...
Hey, that's plenty. That's
great. That will tell you a lot.
Yep, for sure.
It will tell you if they're following 1 Timothy 2. If they are... what kind of people are speaking to these kids? What are they saying? Which means, stop sending your kids, if I can put it this way, parents, stop sending your kids away for 2 weeks to learn how to be apologists at blah, blah, blah institute or whatever, and all this stuff they have for kids to get rid of them for a few weeks. You need to be the apologist in the home. You need to be the theologian in the home, so that when you watch those videos of chapel of a school you're thinking of sending your kid to, you should be saying, oh, I don't like that theologically. And that's one of the dangers. Wouldn't you say, what kind of problems do you think get in the way of trying to find a good school from the parent standpoint? Lack of information, lack of theological knowledge, lack of knowledge of the administrator and what their role is. How do they get caught up on how all this stuff works and what they should be expecting out of an administrator? What does they expect out of a faculty member? How do they know what to expect, even to know what kind of questions to ask?
Yeah, that's tricky. Again, I think I would talk to other families.
Yeah,
I go hang out with some moms and just say, hey, we're looking, what are some things that I wouldn't even think to know because I haven't been in a school? Tell me about programs I should be looking for. What are even academics? Often families going into schools are, what are the academic expectations? Things like that. So I think we always say that the best advertisement is word of mouth, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's because those people know the product. And I would just say, you can go visit with the principal all you want. And I think you should. Go to her, go talk with them. But find out, and if you don't know anybody from that school, just ask the principal. There's some families that I could connect with. And often schools have ambassadors or some kind of, head of some parent club or something who would be willing to just sit down and talk. I'd highly recommend that.
Okay. So with the last couple minutes, let me ask you this. What would be your final advice to parents, whether they're looking for a Christian university or they're looking for a Christian school for their kid? What would be the advice from someone that has had all the experience you've had, just in a few sentences? What would you say to them? What kind of advice?
I would say you have one chance with your child. And I've seen so many parents who just say, you know what, we're not going to invest in this. They pull them out of Christian school, or they dumb down what they're doing for education because they do want to go do some big vacations. And I see them driving great, awesome cars, and not that you can't drive an awesome car, but it just shows where their focus is. So I just say invest in a Christian education, whether you go with homeschooling, putting them in a great co-op, going into an actual Christian school, but be involved, be a partner, support that school. Something I saw so many times was parents not supporting the school or the teachers to the child. I don't know, when I was growing up, my parents supported the school in front of what I said. It was like, if your teacher said that, this is what we're doing. And now they discuss how much they don't like the teacher in front of the child, and I just think, just going back to supporting the school, talking with your children, knowing what's going on, setting a high standard for them. And I really think fostering a love of learning. So many times I saw this with parents, it's like they were apologizing to their child that they had to go to school. Like, I'm sorry, I know you hate homework. I hate it too. All these things are making your child who they're going to be. And of course, number one is praying with your child for their school, for their leaders, for their teachers, and discussing, what are you learning? How are you growing? And coming alongside them. This is not a handing them over to whoever and letting them do it. Yeah. This is a partnership. So I guess that would be my number one thing to parents is invest, take the time, learn what learn about the organization that you're partnering with, so that you can be a team with them. Don't put them somewhere where you can't be a team member with, just so that they can do it for you, but be a partner. and pray with your children for that organization, their teacher.
That's great. That is so helpful. Yeah, I have learned a lot of lessons from having my first son and then kind of starting over again. There are so many things I wish parents would take to heart. Do not be a part of a school that doesn't see you as a partner, but sees you as someone that disappears so that they can take the
drop
kid.
and go.
Yeah, yeah, they're not a daycare. If you're part of a school that feels like a daycare and you're not a partner, get out of there. Because you said something very important. You get one chance with your kid. You really do. And I feel that more than anybody else, that you get one chance, and the kind of things you sacrifice because of what you value is going to tell that kid more
Absolutely.
than anything else. So I hope that today was helpful for you. It was certainly helpful to me. And thank you very much, Jenny, for joining us
Thanks
today.
for the opportunity.
And thank you for joining us. We will be back again. Tune in to the Renton Rathbun Show, and we'll have more for you.